My dear friends, today's reflection is slightly different. I'm still doing the Revelation reflection, so don't panic, but I thought I would do something, a shorter reflection on Advent. This is a very misunderstood season in the church's calendar, as many in our church simply see it as preparation for Christmas. It is not. It is the season when we prepare for the return of Jesus to judge the living and the dead. However, because this whole theology is so misunderstood, especially by clergy, and thereby the laity, we default to a season which we more easily understand, and that is to think about the birth of Jesus at Christmas. And so Christmas, instead of being 2 weeks long, becomes 6 weeks long because Advent is sort of a de facto preparation for Christmas. But it's not. When I was a catechist in Adelaide, in my final year before ordination, I spent that year at St. Augustine's Unley. It was a wonderful time, and Father Max Bowers was there at the time. He is a dynamic and forward-thinking priest, and he thought about things well before others had. He was a great mentor and continues to be a good friend. The only problem with him was that he was a mad keen Collingwood supporter. But anyways, we can't all be perfect, can we? But one of the things that he did before many other people did in the church is he had a great sign ministry. And our location opposite the Unley Shopping Centre made it ideal for this so that he could put up some thoughtful signs to help the people as they were coming to and from their cars, going to and from the shops, to think about other things other than the day-to-day humdrums of life. He had me putting up his signs. And one of the signs that he had me put up was, "Jesus is coming. Everybody, look busy." The sign has some excellent insights in its phrasing. The reality is Jesus is coming. That's what we say in the creed, isn't it? However, what does it mean to look busy? This is the ultimate issue for us in the church, and one that has vexed us for so long. So often today in our churches, our people are overburdened with activity that doesn't alert or doesn't allow kingdom growth. All it does is sometimes keeps the door of the churches open, and only then in some cases. But in the majority of cases, the activity that we engage in our churches simply slows the decline so that we can delude ourselves into thinking that we're all right, or we simply make sure that the church is open when it's our turn to go to God. It seems to me that we have to be busy. But what is the busyness that we need to be attending to? That's the issue, isn't it? I recently listened to a podcast from Radio National called God Forbid. It's an excellent series. But the one I was listening to was on the recent events in the UK about the Archbishop of Canterbury having to resign over a report into abuse in the church. The podcast had a friend of mine, Michael Jensen, on it. He's the rector of St Mark's Darling Point in Sydney. And he had also two other people from the UK discussing the issue. One of the issues that was raised was, can the church survive all of this scandal? The answer seems to be yes, but we have to do something radical. We actually have to start being the church that Jesus has called us to be, and that was to be a church that imitates him. One of the problems identified in the podcast was that the church has slid into management rather than gospel-focused ministry. And as I look around the church, I see clergy putting on more services, meditation groups, etc. Parishes run fetes and op shops and other money-making enterprises. And these are all great, and they do actually bring people in. But if they're not focused on helping the church do the business of being Jesus, then we are a clanging cymbal or a clashing gong. We're looking busy, but we're not doing much of the kingdom, not doing much that is of kingdom value. I know this because the churches continue to be in decline. And in fact, I think if you ask the people in the churches, they would actually admit that it's not working either, because they can see the decline around them as well. And what's more is that those who are involved are getting more and more exhausted, and there's no one coming up behind them to replace them. So at some point, the whole thing is just going to collapse. We see an issue about what is important. Like this in the early church. In Galatians, Paul recounts how there was to be a division between evangelistic efforts, sort of as became a bit of a management issue. And he was encouraged to do what he was encouraged to do, but what he was also admonished not to forget was, do not forget the poor. This is at the heart of Jesus' message, to reach out to the poor, those who have nothing. But also, as we discover, people can have much and still be impoverished. So what does it mean to be Jesus-focused, a Jesus imitator? Well, Jesus was kind and inclusive, welcoming, encouraging and accepting and forgiving. He was willing to change things around. He was willing to do things differently. These are many characteristics that we do well in our churches, but only with those that we know. But we are terrible with those whom we do not know or simply dislike. And when it comes to doing something new in the church, well, just forget it, because you're actually going to impinge on my time in the church, and I like it this way. And besides, if we do that, when we do allow things to happen differently, it's usually at the most inconvenient time for everybody else. So we can only be Jesus-focused if we are diligently studying the Word of God and being more diligent in our daily prayer, because that's what Jesus did. And when we do that, we find that we can open up our hearts and minds to new and exciting ways to be Jesus-focused people. By combining these, we learn how to be more like Jesus. When I was in Sydney, there was a huge push for people to be in what we might call here in our diocese Bible study groups. But in Sydney, they were called growth groups because the emphasis is on people growing to be more like Jesus. Yes, they study the Bible, but they interact with one another, support one another, encourage one another. They are the primary means where people can come to be a church community and where real pastoral care can take place. And what's more important is that the people are involved in the pastoral care, not just the parish priest. This is what Jesus did. He gathered people together into a community of followers, and he taught them and he encouraged them, and they encouraged one another. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than just going to the synagogue on Saturday and the temple from time to time. To be in a relationship with God means to be in a relationship with God's people, because that is where God is, with God's people. If we want to be ready for Jesus when he comes, and Advent Sunday, this Sunday, is all about starting to get ready, and Jesus is coming, by the way, we have to not look at being busy, but we have to be busy being the people of God, doing the things that Jesus calls us to be and do. That is loving, kind, compassionate, in tune with what God is doing in our part of the world in which we live and participating in that with God. That is how we prepare for the coming of Jesus. The Lord be with you.